This is the Björn Ludwig Year 1 podcast.
Mark, great to have you. One sentence. Who are you?
Yeah, all good. Great to be here. Yeah, it's always good spending time with you.
So you're from South Africa. You're obviously a well-known orthodontist. Many know you from social media, conferences, lectures. You have organized a fabulous South African annual meeting for how many times?
Since 2013.
Since 2013. Wow, it's a meeting everyone should join because besides South Africa's a very impressive country, the meeting is cool. It's a lot of organization, but you had all the big speakers actually from.
Yeah, well, that's been the intention over the years, to make sure that we always have the best, and give our members the best, and also to invite international delegates as well. But, it's quite far away. So often, we don't end up getting that many in terms of international delegates coming all the way down here.
What I like about South Africa the most is that we are in the same time zone. Yeah? So
Yeah, it's always convenient. Yeah,
it's very convenient because when we are texting, we are always in the same time zone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you have to go and lecture at another place, like the States or something, then you have to deal with jet lag.
So I got to know you as an orthodontist with quite strong beliefs, but not only beliefs, you always go tall and stand upright, and you have some ethical ground. My first question is, what shaped your thinking? What shaped your thinking to be the man who you are now? Why you have these strong things? More mentors, more mistakes, your country? I don't know. I would be interested before we dive into our topic of today.
Bjorn, at that time when I was starting out and I wanted to become an orthodontist, at that time in South Africa, it was very difficult to get in on the program. There was extreme competition for positions on a very limited program.
Yeah.
They, normally taking only 3 people every second year at that point in time. And it was a very strong program, but the guys who were my mentors, or, at the time, were of that nature. They were very, very straight down the line, if I could call it that. And I think that had a distinct influence. Okay. And then, I think what shaped it further to that was being exposed to the iconic characters that came to our yearly Congress, for instance. And I mean, my first Congress as a postgraduate student was with your, probably, I would say, imagine one of your most special mentors, and that was Bjorn Zackerson. Okay. Wow. That was my first. And I saw Bjorn on another 2 or 3 occasions after that he came to South Africa. So, things like that also had an influence in shaping my career.
Okay.
And then as time went on, I noticed that many people were deviating from what I would call what was scientifically justifiable, for want of a better way of putting it. And I think that's a much bigger topic, you know what I mean? But I think you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
And I ended up in a situation where I saw all this nonsense that was being sprouted all the time. Mainly with the advent of social media playing a huge part in our lives, because that has become the playground, hasn't it? Fortunately or unfortunately, there's a lot of good stuff that happens there, but there's also a lot of junk.
Yeah.
And I think I also saw, because in my early years, I was up until about 2013, I was teaching as well in the department, and I could see what was happening with the graduates, with the students, and it was getting more concerning as time went on, because their motives and what they wanted to do when they graduated as orthodontists, and it kind of like, based on what I had experienced in my career, it kind of just didn't work for me,
Yeah.
and I felt pretty, and then I think as time went on, I don't know how it happened, but I got involved in writing some editorials.
Yeah.
And I think the first one I actually ever wrote was for Kevin O'Brien. It was just a little blog for Kevin, back in about 16 or something like that. It was at the time
Yeah.
when things were really starting to go off track.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember writing most of that blog while I was on the plane returning from the AAO. You know,
Then you are mostly in a very special mood.
yeah, and I was just quite irritated with the way things were going. And then I followed it up with an editorial in the APOS journal, which was called Pursuit of Excellence, a Forgotten Quest.
Yeah.
And so all of these things were on the same kind of track, if you know what I mean, with
Yeah.
the same
I
kind of.
think it's a quite typical career. You know, you meet important people when you're younger. Maybe it happened to me as well. You have just listened to the lecture for 3 minutes or 4 minutes, but the impact
Yeah.
names lifelong.
Yeah.
Then we get experience, we grow older, we see frustration, and then as you did, you want to help students and you see, wow, it's going in the wrong direction. And I think lately with social media and all this world is getting crazy. And this is why I decided we talk today about the very special topic about MARPE. Let's call it
Yeah.
just MARPE because there are so many names, must be, BAM, whatever. We just stick to one term.
Yeah.
And the question is MARPE the biggest hype in orthodontics right now? Not if it's justified or not.
Yeah.
Do you feel it's the biggest hype?
I think there's a lot of big hypes at the moment, as one could call it. That always reminds me of that. I'm sure you've seen that graph of the Gartner hype cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think that describes a lot of it, to be honest. And one of the interesting things about that graph, Bjorn, for me, is the shape of that graph mimics almost identically the Dunning-Kruger effect graph.
Yeah.
Now, isn't that quite an interesting concept? For me,
Yeah.
I find it quite interesting. But, there's many hypes at the moment. And I mean, I think probably one of the hype that we knew for so many years was the aligner hype, of course,
Sure.
and then now, I mean, we have various different things that are happening. Some of them are interrelated.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, when we talk about, for instance, the MARPE hype or the bone anchored expansion hype, whatever you want to call it for that matter, it's being attached to, for instance, the sleep scenario.
Sleep scenario and
The airway.
They're related. Yeah, airway.
Yeah. So, and all of these things seem to be simmering at the moment. And at times, someone will go off at a tangent about, say, for instance, the sleep aspect related to MARPE or something else, aesthetics maybe, I don't know. So it's very current at the moment.
Yeah.
But of course, very overdone. And we're seeing it being abused, and we're seeing it being used as an income stream.
Absolutely. I have many of such questions. I have a lot, so we keep to educate our colleagues or to provoke some sort of our colleagues to stimulate discussion. We keep it short.
Yeah.
And when I was writing the questions, when I did a write-up, I thought, are we expanding patients or are we expanding expectations? And we focus a bit on MARPE in adults. Quick question, just your opinion. It doesn't have to be completely evidence-based or whatever. Just shoot out how you feel, what you think.
Yeah.
Diagnostic first.
Yeah.
If you look at CBCT staging, big hype, is it a real decision tool in adults? Or do you think, okay, you can do it, but you also can leave it?
What, you mean taking a CBCT?
Yeah. Taking a CBCT to make a MARPE more predictable? Should I go for a MARPE or SAPE? If a decision, does a CPC take that decision, making it easier? Taking it lighter makes it more predictable, or you say, okay, I know the science, but me as Mark, I don't care, or I don't care, it's too hard.
Yeah, I think you're on that. I think one has to go back a step. I mean, the first thing one has to decide, and that's based on a diagnostic exercise, is whether it's actually necessary. That's the first thing.
True.
Okay.
Is it really necessary?
But let's assume for a moment that you've been down that road and you have identified that it is necessary. Okay. In my opinion, then you have to use the technology that provides you with the best opportunity for an outcome for the patient primarily. I mean, yes, we also want it to be predictable from our perspective as the practitioner providing it, and it to
Yeah.
be safe
Yeah.
for the patient as well. So if the CBCT is going to give you the information that is going to make the procedure predictable, safe, etc., then yes, absolutely.
Okay. And now we are within predictability. What you hear, maybe your personal experience, you read articles, you hear it from other colleagues. And if you put all that together, how predictable do you feel is MARPE in adults?
Well, I think
If you put it as a career, as an
yeah,
expectation from
yeah. I don't think it's nearly as predictable as we would like it to be quite honest. I think some of the time it's hit and miss. And
Mm,
then what happens, I think, is that you'll find the one practitioner who's really switched on, someone like
mm,
you, for instance, might
yeah,
turn around and say, okay, you know what, this is not working, and might reach that decision a lot earlier. And then
yeah,
you might get the other guy at the other end of the spectrum, maybe, who's going to flog away and flog away.
yeah.
To me, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I wondered about that myself, and when I wrote the questions or designed the question, I thought, at times it was for me, for myself, when confidence, my own confidence towards MAPI became overtreatment, because I felt at times so confident, let's place these screws, how many ever,
Yeah.
and I felt we can design it and metal print. And suddenly my own confidence got overtreatment, and I ignored even my own quite high failure rate in adults, because I thought, okay, in some it worked. Sure, in some it will work, but you have also, I mean, even if it fails just in 10%, it's significant. It's significant.
Can you always predict it up front?
I
That's
cannot. I
exactly.
cannot. I cannot. I mean, even with the suture maturation and everything, I don't feel personally that MAPI got fully predictable in what I know in my office in adults. Yeah. And then we come to the next question. What do we think it's the first sign of MAPI failure in adults? Because many people, when I talk to the younger ones, they say, okay, if it doesn't work, if I expand and activate the screw, then maybe I do the surgery later, or nothing bad can happen. Is that true?
Well, the thing is that we tend, I say we, but I mean, I'm talking globally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But there has been, I think, an overemphasis on a midline,
true.
as being indicative of even success. Because
Yeah,
I think even in cases where you do see that happening, what's happening elsewhere at we know the other major centers of resistance.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and even if we do get that midline diastema, how do we know that we what that expansion is sustainable in the long term,
Yeah.
or even in the short term for that matter? But the other thing is, and I suppose you'll see things like bent screws and
Mm.
in the absence of a diastema and so on.
Yeah,
I
I,
think.
I showed yesterday in our community in a group a case, because I wanted to demonstrate a few things, and he was just there in the morning, so I picked him, and he was an adult with bone screws, MAPI, and
Yeah.
my SAPI, and basically he got a beautiful diastema and a huge amount of expansion. And then I went through all his records, and I recognized actually that posteriorly he had minimal expansion, and he had a very distorted arch shape. And it did not get too obvious to me when I was just doing his checkups, because
Yeah.
finally now I'm managing the case. But that's a good thing about teaching. You dig deeper, you dive deeper in your cases, and you realize, wow, maybe what I assumed happened did not completely happen. And it looked a bit like that was very special, huge diastema, and it almost not compressed the molar area, but
Yeah.
surely it did not open parallel, and not as I have wished to. Very interesting. The question is what we have in the literature when we have MAPI in adults. At times, do we stop too late trying? And do we escalate too late into surgical alternatives?
I think that's 100% correct, Bjorn, because I think there's a kind of reluctance to, well, I wouldn't say admit failure necessarily, but to escalate to surgery. You know, I think what's happening, at least with some practitioners out there, is they over-promising.
True. Overpromise.
And I think they're giving the patient the impression, you know, this is going to work and you won't need surgery. And I mean, some, as we know, are even going out there on a limb on social media and saying that you never need surgery. You know, you just need a multitude of screws, for instance. Now, I mean, that is totally unbiological.
You are a bit lucky living in South Africa, not only because of the weather and the nature, but you are not in this typical inner Europe circle where patients are traveling. What we recognized is with these MARPE, adult airway, posture, whatever, we call them travelers. Names of patients, let's call him Michael Williams, and he was already with Mark, he was with Benedict, he was with Björn, he was with Kevin, he was with Jonathan.
Yeah.
Always bringing all the records, having started with Professor Mu and then traveling all over Europe. And these guys are psychologically alterated massively, and they are not suing the former doctors. They are just traveling on to the next expander, and it's very difficult to filter them out. Luckily, I'm a bit countryside, so I get an email first, and we can say we are fully booked. Yeah.
I think that happens everywhere, Bjorn, you know,
Okay.
to a lesser or greater extent. You know, whatever treatment modality it might be, okay, and especially in this realm, because it's crazy how you're seeing, again, especially on social media, how lay people have decided what kind of treatment they want.
Yeah.
Based on the internet thing. I spoke with you the other day about idiot syndrome. I mean, that is, when I saw that, that was a beautiful description of the entity,
That's true.
in my opinion. But the thing is, they shop around until they find
They shop
someone
around. Yeah.
who's prepared to do treatment according to how they want it done. Okay.
Absolutely.
Not what is right or anything like that. And you know, this is where the informed consent discussion becomes so important. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and I think that has been relegated to a level of lesser importance by many practitioners, because they're really trying to sell a treatment protocol or whatever you want to call it to people, because it develops an income stream.
Yeah. Lately, we started to review the literature, you and me together, to find out a bit more about MARPE and other things. So we do now a quick literature round for the colleagues about the hardware and force and so on. More screws, better outcome. What does the literature say at that moment? More screws, 6, 8, 10 screws, giving more predictability.
And to me, that just interprets to brute force in trying to overcome biology. That's the way I see it. And that, I mean, makes little sense.
It can even be a danger. It can be the opposite way around.
Complications.
Yeah.
So using brute force to overcome biology and anatomy, it's illogical in my mind.
Yeah. I fully agree, because as with all our new technology, it gets so rigid. You have so many screws. It gets brutal forces. And I agree. It's such a nice term. You cannot overcome biology. You get fractures and so on.
Yeah. You know, Bjorn, it's quite an interesting, because it reminds me of when you guys were coming to South Africa back in 2014.
Yeah.
Now, when I went to the AAO in 2013, okay, it was actually my first AAO, but I went there with the express mission of identifying speakers for the 2014 Congress, which was our 50th anniversary Congress. And I went there as the president of the South African Society, and I landed up going to a whole lot of functions that are always organized for the presidents at the AO, one of them being the WFO breakfast and everything. And I landed up sitting next to Vince Kokich.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
And it was actually like 2 months before he passed away. But when I actually was identifying speakers, and I think I had this discussion with you. I don't know if you remember it when we went for dinner when you arrived. But after I got back from the Congress, my program was very, at that stage, quite focused on TADs. And I was wondering whether it was too TAD orientated. Because, I mean, in 2013, TADs were like the flavor of the day, you know.
I mean, you had Benedict, you had Chris Cheng, you had
Yes,
me,
yeah.
Emile
Or
Rousseau,
George Faber.
Faber.
Yeah. And all of them were speaking quite a lot on TADs, you know. So anyway, I had this communication over email with Vince, which I've still got today, believe it or not. I mean, it's surreal, you know. And my question to him was, you know, are we overdoing this whole TAD thing? Okay. And he wrote back to me and he said, you know, I totally agree with you. Okay. Because at the time, one of my colleagues here in South Africa had gotten a transfer patient from somewhere in Asia who had an immeasurable number of screws. And I used the term porcupine patients at the time.
You know, I remember you told me, and for sure I had in the
Yeah,
same years a discussion with Vince and Björn
yeah.
also. And I agree, you know, we were too overconfident with all the
Mm,
tabs, and we had not the nicest treatment outcomes, just a lot of
mm,
technology. But I see a difference to what we experience today. At least we were willing to
mm.
listen.
Yeah,
I was willing to sit in front of Vince and listen
yeah.
to him and allow the advice. I try to improve. And you
Mm,
know, this is a generational contract. For sure, if you're younger, you think, wow,
mm,
I will change the world. But still,
mm,
you have to keep the ability to listen and maybe change. I see with a lot of these new trends all over MARPE and Airway, people are not
mm.
listening. They are just broadcasting,
Yeah.
and you could give the kindest advice ever,
But you know, at that
and it's
time,
not received.
it was one of the things that I wanted to get onto because Vince, you know, he published the editorial in the AJO, It's Only a Screw. And you remember
Yeah,
that one well because I know
best
you've
one,
used it.
best one. Yeah,
Yeah. But he also gave a lecture at that time on various platforms. And the lecture was entitled Temporary Anchorage Devices, Is the Technique Supplanting Diagnostic Logic?
perfect.
Now, if we take that statement now and we put it into the MARPE context, is the technique supplanting diagnostic logic?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's some very, very good similarities.
There are many similarities, and
Mm,
remember, I need to cite another editorial of him. What
mm,
was wrong with the three-chair office? Remember that one? Yeah,
yeah,
and I think it was so true. We have now 1 decade. Offices are getting larger. Change. You had chains. Sorry,
mm,
chains. You had to have at least 1 or 2 satellite offices.
yeah,
Beside that, you were a nobody. Yeah.
mm,
And now in 2026, so many get bankrupt, have financial problems. They say,
mm,
why did I go into 10 shares plus? Why not keeping it limited? Winth and these guys, they were so right. Actually, they were visionaries. Yeah.
mm,
Keep it humbled, keep it diagnostics. Be happy that we have such a good profession and can feed our families. Yeah.
mm, mm,
Don't over push. We
mm,
are not like superstars or
mm,
billionaires or whatever.
mm,
I miss him a lot. I miss these
mm,
guys a lot.
yeah,
We lost too many role models. Actually, I
mm.
don't see many role models anymore.
Well, you see, now we have those that are assuming the role of role models, and they really don't have the credentials.
Yeah. We have a few more questions. I
Mm.
try to keep it 30 minutes, so we have not many minutes left.
Ah.
About ethics, because ethics, Peter Krakow really influenced my gangster style, because without ethics, I would be just a gangster. So is MARPE today more an ethical problem than a technical one? Are we just expanding because we can?
I think one's got to go back a little bit, and look at what what is stimulating the practitioner as well as the patients out there to aim for mark. Okay. Because I think like a few other things, what is happening is that there's a push in that direction. Okay. from the patients, some are coming in asking it for various different reasons. Okay. For some practitioners, it's become the default position. Okay. For various different reasons. And, whether it's airway, non-extraction, whatever it might be, you know what I mean? And I think, as a result of the stimuli pushing people in the direction of using it, okay, what is being lost is the specific indication for using it, okay. And obviously ethics is tied in there, because I think a lot of practitioners have lost sight of the actual true indication for trying it, number one, and number two, applying it ethically, not only from a perspective of the treatment modality per se, but in the way that they present it to people, in terms of giving them all the necessary information, what the pros and cons are, and what the possibilities are. In other words, the fact that it might fail, and then what is your plan B? So I think it's been lost there. I think it's the ethical thing's been lost in a lot of places.
And when I got addicted to orthodontics when I have seen fantastic cases where I was sitting in the audience and thought, wow, unbelievable what we can do as dentists specialized in orthodontics. And I have a few of my top stars where I think these cases are close to being unreal. Renato Cocconi, it's for me like unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will never reach his level. Also, Marco.
Yeah.
Vince was good. Björn was good. Ute and Lawrence are, and now comes the question. When I look at my top 10 of people where I think these cases are unreal, these are magic, it's art, they are not using MARPE. They are using it little, maybe once a year. Some are even saying, wow, don't. So I see a huge conflict, like a dilemma. Those who are maybe the best in our profession, which we will never reach the highest level, they don't need that tool. And then when I look at some MARPEs, because I have never seen a complete case, I have never seen beautiful records. I just see monster diastemas. I mean, I have to exclude one, Juan Carlos Perez Varela. He's a MARPE speaker, good friend. He has all the beautiful cases. So, but some others, I have never seen. I think, what are you doing? So I see there a conflict somehow.
That's a very important observation, I think. That I'm sure that those people that you've mentioned are using them in the correct circumstances, but they by no means going overboard. When you see some of these guys, you say they've done, I don't know how many hundreds of these things in the last many years. It makes little sense.
I'm really happy to have good friends, critical friends. Last night I was cycling and then I got a message WhatsApp from Jonathan Sandler, and he said, you wrote in one case, this was a clear bone-borne anchorage case. And I said, you should be more careful. And I said, yeah, stupid. Why did I say clear? You are in a rush and do that. But for me, that is friendship and a very good interaction, that you have someone saying, how did you mean it? Is it really true? Or you as a teacher, are you leading in a different direction?
Yeah.
So final question, the future, Mark. We are in MARPE, so sorry for that to close up. Is MARPE really a revolution or just better marketing?
I think at the moment it's the big hype, which is obviously tied to marketing and all those things. If I have to look into a crystal ball and tell you what I think, okay, I think, and I may be very wrong, okay, I think we are heading for a big realization. I think we're heading for instability. I think that complications are going to become far more, whether they report it or not is another thing. I think instability is another thing. I think patients are definitely going to find out what the realities are, and that's unfortunate. I think practitioners are actually also heading for a big wake-up call, and I don't know when or how, what the time frame is with that, and of course whether they will admit it either. That's another story, because I don't feel that, to be honest, I don't feel that those tied to the hype are the most honest individuals. And so I think, the thing is, if it was a drug, like in medicine, there would have had to have been a million trials to establish the safety, the efficacy, all those kind of things before it was used. In orthodontics, things don't work like that. These things get used because we view it as being relatively safe, that it's not going to, and I think this one, this is not like a new bracket or something like that, this is making major changes within the craniofacial complex, which is something that is kind of like at the outer edge of orthodontics, isn't it? I mean, in terms of, being invasive, if I could call it that. And so I personally think we're in for a big wake-up call, but who knows?
I'm not very much liked at our office here. The girls don't like me too much, and because the problem is I give too many things for free, and I ask myself, why do I give the patient so many things I want to give it for free, which is not reasonable at times? And then the reason is I feel guilty at times. I feel guilty that I earn money for some poor results. And this morning I had a few things, like we had a girl, she started with a deep bite, the bite re-deepened a bit, she bites on her retainer, and so on. Then we had one, we want to finish treatment, but she's still a quarter class 2, and so on. And I feel guilty about my poor outcomes, about my problems. But now, if I bring that in relation, such minor problems, sorry to say minor, make me sleepless night and make me feel guilty. If I bring that in correlation when you have the orbital floor after MARPE dropping down and you get temporary blindness, or your cranial base fracture, I mean, that's out of proportions.
Absolutely.
How guilty would I feel then? I would deliver myself maybe to the police station here, which is not frequently open, but I have to fit in the opening hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I know exactly what you mean. I flog myself over a route that's not upright or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, what these guys are doing is just like off the charts.
So thank you, Mark. We are a bit over time. Thanks for sacrificing your lunch break.
It's cool.
Have
Oh,
a
good.
wonderful Easter.
And you.
Thank you. I will stop it here. Thank you.
Keep on riding.
You too.
This is the Björn Ludwig Year 1 podcast.